His face was pale. The jovial, relaxed expression Admiral Thorne had been wearing all night. It was just gone. He stood up slowly, stiffly, his chair rattling against the leg of my father's dining table. His eyes were locked on my inner wrist, then they snapped up to meet mine. I could see the dawning realization, the professional shock. "Commander?" he murmured, his voice cracking just enough for me to hear. He turned to my father, his expression now one of pure, unfiltered disbelief. "Robert," he said, his voice low, "you never mentioned your daughter was Wraith Actual. 2 hours earlier the house was full. My father, Robert, a retired Navy captain who still wore his rank like a second skin, was holding court. This was his welcome home party for his old Navy buddy, Admiral James Thorne. The Admiral outranked him, and I could tell my father was desperate to impress, to relive the glory days. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the sound of men laughing too loudly at their own stories. I, of course, was late. I slipped in unnoticed, or so I hoped, dressed in jeans and a long-sleeved shirt, my civilian armor. But my father never misses an opportunity to cast his characters. He spotted me from across the room. "Ah, there she is," he bellowed, a wide, false smile plastered on his face. The room quieted just enough. "Our family's assistant is back." A few people chuckled, playing along. I just stood there, my face a perfect, practiced mask of calm. This was his favorite joke. The assistant title had started when I got my first government job. A boring GS-7 position in his eyes. It never mattered that I'd been promoted 7 times since. To him, I was, and always would be, the help. He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was more for possession than affection. "Sarah, be a dear and grab the Admiral another bourbon, will you?" He then turned to Admiral Thorne, leaning in conspiratorially. "She's a professional admin up in DC, James. Very organized." I looked at Admiral Thorne, the man who, unbeknownst to my father, sat on the oversight committee for my actual program. The man who had, just last week, read my after-action report on Operation Nightshade, a report filed under my call sign. My organized admin work. I smiled, a small tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. I took the Admiral's empty glass, and I said nothing. My father thought it was just another easy joke at my expense, another little jab to remind me of my place. He had no idea he'd just belittled me in front of one of the few men on Earth who had the clearance to read my classified mission reports. He had no idea he'd just ordered one of the Pentagon's most covert assets to play bartender. To understand the reckoning that was about to unfold in his own living room, you have to understand the 2 lives I was living. I remember this one dinner about a year ago. My brother Mark, the family's golden boy who could do no wrong, had just been made an assistant branch manager at a local bank. My father, Robert, was holding his beer aloft, giving a toast in the middle of a crowded restaurant. He was beaming. "Now that's a career," he announced, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "A real, tangible ladder. You can see the progress." He clapped Mark on the back, and my mother and aunts all cheered. Then, as always, the spotlight had to find me, if only to dim. He turned to me, his smile becoming a little more condescending. "And Sarah, well, she's got a nice, safe government job. Good benefits." He said benefits, like he was talking about dental insurance, not a security clearance that could buy and sell his entire retirement package. "We're just glad she's not into all that danger you see on TV." I just nodded, picked at my food, and let the moment pass. It was the path of least resistance. It was always the path of least resistance, if he only knew. My nice, safe government job had involved me authorizing drone surveillance on 3 separate continents before 9 a.m. that very morning. My good benefits weren't a 401k. They were the fact that my signature on a red line operational budget could move assets and personnel in a way his entire 30-year naval career couldn't dream of touching. This tangible ladder he was so proud of for Mark. My ladder didn't have rungs. It was a sheer cliff face in the dark, and I was at the top. And my admin work? The stuff he imagined was just scheduling and memos? It was writing the daily threat assessments that men like him, and men like Admiral Thorne read as gospel every single morning. The words I wrote, the analysis I provided, it shifted fleets, it grounded aircraft, it changed policy. But in his world, in my family's world, I was just a very organized assistant. My real world wasn't a loud, cheerful restaurant. It was the absolute sterile silence of a skiff, a sensitive compartmented information facility. It's a place where the walls listen, and the air itself feels classified. There are no windows. Just the cold blue glow of tactical maps projected on a wall. It was in that room, just last week, that I'd been running Operation Nightshade. My team was there, but my most trusted asset is Spectre. He's my tactical lead and 2IC, a grizzled Master Chief who has seen more than my father ever will. While my father saw a girl who couldn't change her own oil, Spectre saw his commander. I gave the final order, my voice low and steady, not a hint of doubt. Execute. Alpha protocol is green. We are go. Spectre just nodded once, his eyes all business. Copy, actual, he'd said. Team is wheels up in 5. In that moment, the lives of 200 operators rested on my analysis. On my word. My father worried about Mark's portfolio. I worried about assets in hostile territory. We were not living in the same universe. My father always hated my tattoos, but the one on my wrist, he didn't even know what it was. He just thought it was some rebellious design. It's not. It's a minimalist U-77. It isn't a formal unit designation you can look up in any database. It's a legacy call sign. It represents the original 7 founders of a specialized intelligence directorate, a group so secret their names are still redacted from official histories. The ink is a tradition. It's not handed out with a medal. It's worn only by the current acting commander of that entire directorate. It's an inside secret, so deep inside that 99.9% of the military wouldn't recognize it. But to the 0.1% who do, the old-timers, the high-level operators, the admirals on oversight committees, it's like seeing a ghost. It's an immediate, undeniable symbol of authority. It means you're Wraith Actual. For years, I let him have his narrative. It was easier. It kept my world separate. It kept me safe from his judgment, and it kept him safe in his comfortable, simple reality. But when he used my failure to try and score points with Admiral Thorne, one of the men who literally helped design Unit 77's founding charter, the firewall between my worlds was about to be breached. This wasn't some grand, pre-planned trap. I didn't walk into that party intending to blow up my father's world. I walked in just trying to survive another family gathering, just another night of being the assistant. But when my father pushed me to play bartender for one of the few men on the planet who understood my real job, something in me snapped. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. The decision was made in an instant. I would stop hiding. I went to the kitchen and poured the bourbon, my hand perfectly steady. I walked back into the living room. My father was mid-story, laughing. Admiral Thorne smiled politely. "Admiral," I said, my voice even. He turned. My father, of course, had already introduced us. "Admiral, this is my daughter Sarah. The admin." I had just smiled and shaken his hand. "A pleasure, sir. My father's spoken of you." I knew exactly who he was. I had briefed his office under my call sign just a few weeks prior. Now, I was handing him his drink. As I extended the glass, I made my move. It was small, almost unnoticeable to a civilian. I used my other hand to adjust the watch on my left wrist. My sleeve, which I always wore long, pulled back just enough. For a full 3 seconds, the minimalist U-77 tattoo on my inner wrist was clearly visible. I didn't look at the tattoo. I made direct, unflinching eye contact with Admiral Thorne. This wasn't a gotcha. It was a quiet, professional acknowledgement. "Yes, sir. It's me." I saw him freeze. It was barely a twitch, but in my world, we're trained to read micro-expressions. The polite smile on his face didn't just fade. It evaporated. His eyes darted from my face to my wrist and back to my face. I could see the gears turning, the rapid-fire calculation in his head. This man was a full admiral. But he had just been served a drink by Wraith Actual. I outranked him in my operational theater. His entire being, his decades of training, would be screaming at him to adhere to protocol. He was in the presence of a Tier 1 commander being treated like a waitress. I saw the flicker in his eyes. He recognized the designation. He knew. My father, completely oblivious, just kept rambling about his golf game. The Admiral had a choice: play along with my father's fantasy, or adhere to the protocol that had defined his entire life. The pin was pulled. My father was in the middle of an old sea story, one I'd heard at least 20 times before. He was laughing loudly, his audience of old neighbors and family friends laughing right along with him. He was holding court just the way he liked it. I was standing quietly by the fireplace, nursing a club soda, just watching him soak up the attention, and watching Admiral Thorne, who hadn't said a single word for at least 5 minutes. The Admiral was just staring down into his bourbon, his knuckles white around the glass. He was a statue of grim silence in the middle of my father's roaring party. My father, finally noticing his guest of honor had gone quiet, tapered off his story. He chuckled, trying to rope him back in. "James? You all right over there? You look like you've seen a ghost." The room quieted down, all eyes turning to the Admiral, who suddenly seemed to be the center of a very different kind of gravity. Admiral Thorne didn't look at my father. He put his glass down on the coffee table with a heavy, deliberate thud that echoed in the sudden silence. He stood up, slowly, his movements stiff and formal, and he looked right at me. His face was pale, his expression one I'd seen in tense briefing rooms right before a critical decision was made. "Robert," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet, "I think I owe your daughter an apology." My father let out a short, barking laugh. He was just confused, trying to find the punchline. "What for?" he boomed, trying to get the party back on track. "For being an assistant? Don't worry, James, she's used to it, we all are." The smile froze on my father's face as the Admiral's expression went from serious to ice cold. "Assistant?" Thorne repeated, his voice dangerously low. His eyes locked back onto my wrist, which I hadn't bothered to cover again. "Unit 77. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. My father's smile didn't just fade, it shattered. I saw the blood drain from his face. Unit 77. It was a legend in his circles. A ghost story. The boogeymen of the intelligence world, the operators who cleaned up the messes no one else could. And the Admiral, he was now standing stiffly, almost at attention, in the middle of our living room. But he wasn't facing my father. He was facing me. "Commander," he said, and the title hit the air like a gunshot. "Ma'am. My apologies. I was not read into your current CNC status. I am at your service." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear my mother's sharp inhale. My father just stared, his jaw slack. Then, the Admiral turned to my father. His voice was no longer respectful. It was furious. "Robert, your daughter, she's Wraith Actual. She leads the task force that saved my carrier group in the Black Fog incident last year. We all thought Wraith Actual was some grizzled Delta colonel, not..." He gestured at me, at the admin in jeans. "The admin you just belittled? She briefs the Joint Chiefs. She runs Operation Nightshade." My father was white-knuckling the arm of his recliner, his face a sickly pale gray. He looked so small. All the bluster, all the borrowed authority he'd worn like a uniform for 30 years, it all just evaporated in an instant. He tried to speak, but it came out as a stutter. You're a commander? Like a real..." He couldn't even process it. He couldn't reconcile the assistant he'd mocked for a decade with the reality that was now standing by his fireplace. I finally spoke. My voice wasn't angry. It wasn't triumphant. It was just calm, clear, and full of the authority he never knew I had. "Yes, Dad. I'm a commander." I looked around the room, at all the people who had watched me be the family footnote for my entire life. My safe desk job is running a $900 million Black Ops budget. My benefits are the lives of the 200 operators under my direct command. I looked right at him, at the man who praised my brother's tangible career. I'm sorry I couldn't be more tangible. My father had spent my entire life teaching me the importance of rank. In the end, it only took 2 words from his oldest friend, Unit 77, to show him he didn't even understand the chain of command. The party didn't just wind down, it died. Instantly. The laughter, the music, the bragging, it all just evaporated, sucked into the vacuum of my father's shattered reality. He was still half standing, leaning on the arm of his chair, but his face was ashen. He looked old. All the borrowed confidence, the authority he wore like a captain's uniform, was gone. He was just a humiliated man in his own living room. My mother and brother were frozen, just staring, their expressions a mix of confusion and, for the first time, a little bit of fear. The neighbors just looked at their shoes, desperate to be anywhere else. Admiral Thorne broke the silence. He buttoned his jacket, a formal professional gesture that seemed so out of place. He turned to me and the ice in his eyes was gone, replaced by a deep military respect. He gave a single curt nod. "Commander," he said, his voice firm. "I'll see myself out." It was an honor. He didn't spare my father another glance. He just walked out the front door, the click of the latch echoing through the room. And then, there was just silence. My father finally sank back into his chair, his hands trembling slightly. I waited for him to say something, to yell, to demand an explanation, to apologize, anything. But he just stared at the carpet. He had nothing. His entire narrative, the one where he was the patriarch and I was the footnote, had just been ripped to shreds by his own idol. I realized, in that moment, I wasn't waiting for an apology. I didn't need one. The truth was out. I didn't yell. I didn't list the years of being overlooked, the promotions he ignored, the achievements he belittled. What was the point? The Admiral had said it all. So, I just picked up my keys from the bowl by the door. The familiar jingle was the loudest sound in the house. My father's head snapped up. I looked at him, not with anger, but with detachment. "My assistant job needs me back, Dad," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I'm wheels up at 0400. I walked out the door and didn't look back. The silence that followed me out was absolute. 6 months later, the air in my father's living room had been thick with cigar smoke and ego. The air in this room was cold, sterile, and heavy with the weight of national security. I was in the Pentagon, in the tank, the Joint Chiefs briefing room. 6 months ago, I was being ordered to fetch a drink. Today, I was at the head of the polished mahogany table, and every single person in that room was focused on me. I was the one giving the brief. My voice was calm and steady as I laid out the threat assessment for the straight, the satellite imagery clicking behind me with every point I made. I saw generals and cabinet secretaries taking notes, and in the second row was Admiral Thorne. He wasn't my father's buddy. He was just another flag officer listening intently to my analysis. I wasn't Sarah the admin. I was Wraith Actual, and I had total absolute command of the room. When the briefing ended and the "thank you, Commander" echoed from the head of the table, the room broke into quiet conversations. I was gathering my notes when Admiral Thorne approached, along with my 2IC Spectre. Spectre, the grizzled Master Chief who knew my worth long before my father did, was grinning. "Brilliant analysis on the straight, Commander," Thorne said, his voice full of genuine respect. "That's the second time your intel has kept my assets safe." Before I could even respond, Spectre just smirked, clapping the Admiral on the shoulder in a way my father would never dare. "Told you, sir," Spectre said, his voice a low rumble. "Actual doesn't miss. Not ever." We shared a look. This was my real family. It wasn't built on obligation or blood or a shared last name. It was built on competence. It was forged in pressure and sealed with mutual respect. They didn't need to be told my rank. They had seen my work. Later that day, back in my actual office, a secure room with 3 monitors, and 1 heavily reinforced door, my phone vibrated on the desk. It wasn't a secure message. It was a regular text. I looked at the screen. The name Dad glowed back at me. It was the first text he'd sent me in 6 months. I felt a small something, a flicker. But it wasn't the old ache. It was just curiosity. I opened it. The message was short, hesitant. "Hi, Commander. Just checking in. Your mother says hello. We're proud of you." I read the words. Commander, not Sarah, not assistant. And then, "We're proud of you." All the years I had wanted to hear that. All the achievements I'd laid at their feet, hoping for just 1 ounce of acknowledgement. All the academic awards, the scholarships, the promotions he'd dismissed as admin work. And now, here it was. In a text message. I looked at the text. And I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I just felt quiet. I realized his pride, his acknowledgement, it just didn't have any power over me anymore. It was no longer the currency I operated on. My worth wasn't his to give. It was mine to earn, and I had earned it. I had a briefing to prep for Spectre's team. I typed back a simple reply. "Glad you're both well. In a brief?" I put the phone down, screen first. I archived the message and turned back to the glowing tactical map on my main monitor. My professional family, the ones who had always known my worth, were waiting for their next command. My father believed a legacy was something you inherit. I learned a true legacy is something you build in silence and have acknowledged in public. If you've ever had to operate in silence while others judged you loudly, share your story below. In this community, we respect the assistants. We know they're often the ones really in command.